Good morning, everyone. So I've been paying attention to this Project Veritas law case against New York Times newspaper for defamation. I don't know if you have, but it's a very interesting case. So there was a case back in the 60s in relation to the civil rights movement that kind of has precedent. And it's talking about what newspapers are allowed to publish about public figures. And there are like 3 different levels of what's considered publishable without taking into account the public figure's personal information, data, or opinions. If you're like a president or a star, a newspaper can pretty much publish just about anything it wants to and get away with it, sadly. If you're a lower level popular figure, you have to make a real slate of truth evident that they did something wrong. But if you're a private person, you're allowed to sue pretty much unanimously for defamation. The case that's going on right now is that Project Veritas is trying to say that these articles that were published in September 29th, I believe, in relation to the Omar Payola anyway, we all know what it's about. I'm not going to get into that and get my channel taken down. Where he actually went and hidden camera, basically caught people. And then New York Times proceeded to say in their news section, not in their opinion section, but in their news section, that these were falsified, twisted, blah, blah, edited, blah, 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 according to their sources. Well, then they cite now, in the court case, 50 sources. Well, the 50 sources that they source are other news media that says these things. That's not a source. And so I was thinking about this, and I was thinking pretty hard about how do you get around, okay, so we've got a First Amendment. That's a freedom of speech, freedom of the press. But freedom of the press shouldn't mean that the press can just go and print any kind of garbage that they want to and get away with it when it's not based in fact. So how do you determine whether something's an opinion piece or a fact piece, or if it's mixed opinion and fact? And I think we need to create a civilian organization that is a rating service that all newspapers have to put on their articles, like you have ratings on movies, TV shows, and so on, where it's X-rated or PG-13 or whatever. I think that they need to put a little box in the corner of every article, and if it's an opinion piece, they have to put an O. And then they have to put a number. And they have to have citation of their sources and the number of sources in that little box with the O. And at the bottom of the article, and in the article itself, like you would when you're writing a college paper, you have to cite your sources. Literally, cite your sources. Okay? You can't just play around and just say, oh, so-and-so said, or I think this. Well, why do you think this? If you're going to quote something from some other source, you need to give that source in that article with notation. In other words, where it's stated, just like you would in a college paper, and I've written plenty of them, you have to put a little number in there. And at the bottom of the page, by that number, it tells where that source came from. If you can't write like that, you shouldn't be writing. You learned this in college, okay? It's in the MLA handbook. Okay? That's just simple stuff. And if it's truthful, you have to have a rating of 1 to 5. And the 1 to 5 rating is 1 source, 2 sources, 3 sources, and 5 sources. Or whatever, 4 and 5 sources. Anyway, what I'm saying is that The sources can't be other newspapers, and they can't be fact checkers, and they can't be Wikipedia. They can't be anything like that. They have to be actual sources. You have to go and look at the original content. You have to bring the original person, in this case, O'Keefe and Veritas, and you have to interview them if you want to claim that it's factual and get it an F rating for fact. We're letting these people get away with basically slanderous lies and opinion pieces, and they're making them look like they're truth and factual information. And this goes for news sources too, like TV news sources. If we can't regulate the way they do this to some extent, and that is not infringement on freedom of speech. We're not telling you you can't say it. We just need you to tell us when you're saying it, are you actually coming from a place of factual information, or are you just letting us know what you think? Because what you think and true factual sources are two entirely different things. And that's one of the biggest problems we've had in the last 5 years during the Trump administration, is that people are echo chambering other news sources that haven't sourced their information and claiming that they've got factual sources, when the factual sources are other newspapers, other publications that are also biased, that are also not fact-checking anything. And, like New York Times will say, oh, well, our sources are CNN and blah, 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 and, the Washington Post and the LA Times. Those aren't sources. Unless those people actually went to O'Keefe and got an interview and proceeded to go through every bit of that video and made an effort to then go to the people in that video and interview them, and perhaps brought up court documents or something to that effect and gave citation to that, that's not a source. That's not a factual source. And you can't say, oh, I'm New York Times and my factual sources are fact checkers. First of all, we know that these fact checkers don't do anything but do the same thing that I was just saying. They go to LA Times or CNN or whatever, and they get those opinion pieces, and then they claim that they fact-checked the information. Most of them are biased as could be. I fact-checked the fact-checkers hundreds of times, and they're full of doo-doo, let's put it that way. Most of their stuff is based on articles written by people who have dissenting opinions to whatever the topic is. And when they do go and get some sort of data or information, they don't get the data and information that the original source or original situation was based on. They'll get some other data that has nothing to do with it and twist it and make it look like it has to do with it. And I've seen this over and over and over again. And I've called them out on it many, many times. Made many videos on it. Made many posts on it when I was on Facebook all the time. In my groups that I ran, my pages that I ran. I was constantly calling out fact checkers. Constantly. And showing my sources where they wouldn't show theirs. And the same thing with newspapers and TV. If we can't rein this in, if we can't get a control of what is truthful, what is reality, and get rid of this brainwashing agenda that everybody's on, if we can't actually have, because freedom of speech is being taken from people, like just kind of not changing topics, but let me reel over to the other side for a second. When someone comes up from a dissenting opinion to these major publications, be they TV news or newspapers or online news or whatever, and they post that on a public venue, they're getting deplatformed, censored, fact-checked, demonetized, etc. for their opinion. And sometimes it's not their opinion, it's actually the facts that the fact-checkers and these big corporations are refusing to actually put out there. And the only way they have to refute the truth is to censor it. And so there have been so many people who are reporting truth who have been completely deplatformed off of YouTube, off of Twitter, off of Facebook in the last 5 years that never deserve to be deplatformed. No one deserves to be deplatformed, to be honest with you. Unless you're, doing something totally vile, like horrible things with children or something, you don't deserve to be deplatformed. You have every right as a citizen journalist to speak your mind as long as you state that it's your opinion. And a lot of these people go beyond that and show you the actual facts. And when they do show you the facts and the data, they get deplatformed for it. Because the big corporations, the big newspapers don't want you to see the facts. They don't want everybody to see the facts because it basically stomps out their opinion pieces passed off as truthful news. So we are in a serious conundrum here, and I am really hoping that O'Keefe does not take a payoff from the New York Times when it comes down to it. I hope he nails them to the wall on their opinion pieces that are twisted to make them look like they're truth. And I hope that every source that they claim they used, he goes back and sues every single one of them as well. Because I watched those videos. I saw what was going on. There was nothing faked or coerced or twisted or whatever in an O'Keefe video. And he's won over 300 cases when people have lied about him. 300 cases. That's a lot. I mean, he doesn't put up with it. And there's some good sources out there that are like O'Keefe. And good people out there who are actually fighting back. And I'm so glad to see it. But we need to do some major reform of what is allowed to be considered journalism and freedom of speech underneath the journalistic part of freedom of speech. Freedom of the press should be saved for those who are actually giving true information, and not those who are purposefully hiding true information, twisting it, using other press to say that that's factual when they actually haven't done the research themselves. I would never claim on my channel, unless I had the sources, that something was genuinely fact. Okay? I will say, well, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? These are, what's going around, what information's out there currently. But I'm not going to claim that I'm the definitive individual in the knowing of all the facts and details. Now, these things, these newspapers, these media sources, they have the resources to do the deep dive and make sure that their facts are actually factual. They don't want to because that doesn't go along with their dialogue. That doesn't go along with their agenda, their propaganda. And all they are is a propaganda arm of the deep state. And so we need to stop that. We the people need to stand up and say, look here, first of all, you're not going to censor us, number one. Number two, when you post something in your paper, we're going to censor you when we find that you are not actually doing your research. Because freedom of the press doesn't mean